Will the GOP retake the U.S. Senate? Drama on and off air for the ladies on The View, and we'll go under the radar. All this and much, much more coming up on the Rundown.
All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Ready, camera.
Record.
3, 2, 1.
Record.
Thanks so much for joining us. This is The Rundown, where we take a look at some of the big stories making headlines. I'm your host, John Phillips. Here today in our Los Angeles studios is stand-up comic and PJTV contributor Stephen Cruiser. And right next to him is the columnist for the Washington Times. You can read her online at WashingtonTimes.com, Tammy Bruce. And now it's time to go to the top of the Rundown. And today, Tammy goes first.
All righty. Thank you, Johnny. At the top of my rundown, a quarter of Americans are open to their states leaving the Union. According to a new Reuters poll, 24% of those polled support the idea of their state breaking away. 53% oppose the idea. This comes after the failed Scottish vote to pull out of the United Kingdom. Healthcare reform, Obama's stance on immigration, and foreign policy has left some wondering if their states would be better off on their own. I understand the passion of this. I'd recommend against it. I can imagine ISIS kind of parachuting into, Santa Monica, and California was its own state. It wouldn't know what to do. So it's interesting, though, how it becomes kind of a inspiration when you see another country or a state want to break away. John, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think this is treason. I think it's treason in part
such a wet blanket.
People are ignorant of the history of their country. They're ignorant of what special place we occupy in the world, what special place we have occupied in the world. John Adams always said the purpose of a public education is not to make you proficient in some sort of trade so you can go out and get a job. It was to make sure that we have the next generation of Americans that can take the torch and lead the country on into the future. And unfortunately, we don't do that anymore. People don't know the history of their country. They don't know that we're a special people in a special place. And because of that, in part, you see stupidity like this. And speaking of stupidity, the vote in Scotland, which are me people.
Yes.
Do you know how this
too.
came to be? Which is the most...
Alcohol?
Yeah.
Pretty close. One couple won the lottery and decided that they would take their lottery earnings and put it into their boutique idea of breaking away from the United Kingdom and literally finance the yes side.
Do you know why that happens? Because we're frugal. We're a frugal people. We can't spend money on ourselves, so we have to find a cause, and that's what we do. Now, Stephen, I understand, people you're asked in a poll and you're all charged up and you hear about the Scottish thing all day long. You think the United States is falling apart. It could be just kind of a passionate, fun response like, yeah, let's break away. Or do you think it's as bad as Johnny thinks?
Well, it is treasonous, and it's lazy on top of everything else. We're always looking for the easy. We're always looking, let's impeach him. Oh, let's secede. Oh, how about let's vote? How about we get off our butts and vote? While the voter turnout is so pathetic, because these people aren't disgruntled with the idea of the United States. They don't have a fundamental problem with the Republic. They don't like things in Washington right now. They don't like the politicians in Washington right now. So change the politicians. The fix has always been in the Constitution. The Constitution is brilliant. You can get rid of the people whenever you want. We don't, because we're lazy and voter turnout is always horrendous.
One of the reasons why, one of the arguments was about, of course, the Civil War, is that we could not divide. Because the South then would be taken over by the French, and the North, we'd be taken over by the British again. We had to be together in order to be strong enough to survive a crazy, freaked out world. And yes, look, problems now are our fault. If you secede, you're going to have like a little kind of mini-me of problems, right? You're going to have a country that's as screwed up as you think the larger country is.
All of the problems are man-made. All of the problems are fixable.
Yeah.
What the hell is Rhode Island going to do if it's its own country?
Yeah, well, there you go.
I mean, how do you make that
Surrender
work?
Immediately to the French.
I'm taking over Massachusetts by myself.
I'll take over, Montana somehow.
All right, Cruiser, what do you have for us?
The top of my rundown, NRO's Maggie Gallagher isn't feeling the Republican wave love for this November. She says the GOP has a 50-50 chance of retaking the Senate. In order for this to happen, Gallagher says there needs to be a mass layoff of GOP consultants. Their strategy of avoiding and downplaying social issues can't happen. Monica Webby's campaign, for example, is struggling in Oregon right now. She's a professional single mom who's pro-choice and pro-gay marriage. I agree with her on some of the points here. I'm not so sure about her numbers, but I do agree that for the Republicans ever to be continually competitive, they still need a complete flushing of the consultant system. It's the first thing I called for after the 2012 election.
You did.
The morning after. Because this is like it's like the NFL coaching ranks where failure gets continually rewarded. Mediocrity gets continually rewarded. If you get one good campaign under your belt, you can have 10 bad ones and you're still going to be hired for the next one.
That was a major problem with the Romney campaign, was that advice, the nature of the choices they made, the failure in the get out the vote at the very end.
Hiring McCain people.
Yeah, awful.
So that should be the focus right now, and what I worry about, though, is that we won't do as well as we want to this November, and they still won't be talking about changing the consultant class.
Well,
do you think that'll happen?
I think Maggie Gallagher is wrong about virtually everything here. Okay. Maggie Gallagher is a one-note Johnny. She is anti-gay marriage, and
unlike
to her,
you have multiple notes.
He's nuanced notes.
Yeah.
To her, every campaign should be a referendum on gay marriage, and if it's not, the Republicans are going to lose.
Exactly.
She uses Oregon as her example. Well, Oregon was always going to be a tough pot. That was not a seat that the Republicans ever really had a chance of winning. But look at other states where it was supposed to be a toss-up, or the Democrats were supposed to have an advantage, and they're in play. Iowa is a complete toss-up. New Hampshire is a toss-up. Michigan is competitive. And the fact of the matter is that right now, whenever Republicans run an ad on illegal immigration, you see their numbers go up. That's what Scott Brown did in New Hampshire. You look at Republicans that are running on Obamacare. When they start hitting Obamacare, their numbers go up. So this is not a gay marriage election like Maggie Gallagher wants it to be. This is an election that's going to be a referendum on Obamacare, on illegal immigration, and on issues that are pressing.
The abortion and gay marriage are what I term the boutique issues.
Yes.
Are these issues that raise money for certain sectors on both the left and the right. The American people get it, that it's immigration, it's Obamacare, it's jobs, it's the economy that are going to affect their lives. And they're also getting to know more and more gay people. They're getting to have a much more expanded experience because of the internet, the nature of who people are, and they realize that while leftists who are gay are a problem, gays in general, perhaps not so much. And I think this has been a great education of the American people, but it also tells you that with all this push on those boutique issues, that the American people still realize the issues that matter.
Well, you and I have talked for years about not leading with some of the social issues, to take care of the other things first. And while I may not agree with her on everything here, and you don't agree with her, maybe just because you hate Irish Americans, but she is right. Broken clocks, right twice a day. Okay, she's right about the consultants. She's absolutely right about that still. That has to happen here. And secondly, I find value in this because one of my big worries going into what are supposed to be wave elections for our side is complacency and laziness, and back to the voter turnout thing. You've got so many high-powered Democrats on TV right now going, oh, it's going to be a Republican wave, Republican. Yeah. I think that's to keep people at home. And so if some people on our side are saying, no, it's not going to be so good, and it frightens some people into getting to vote, it's got value.
Well, we know that, and it doesn't have to be necessarily contrived. The fact of the matter is 4 million Republicans stayed home for the 2012 election. And it means those are people who were active in 2008. So there's no time for, and then there's still reasons to be, like people don't like Roberts. People are not liking McCain. People don't like McConnell. But this is not the time, of course, for people to have tantrums.
You really always have that element. I mean, let's not forget, Ronald Reagan, who all of us love and adore, in 1980, had a third-party challenger who was a Republican, John Anderson.
Right, good point.
So you never have a 100% happy party. I mean, they're big tents, so you're always going to have disunity.
Yeah.
To some degree or another.
Yeah. It's going to be exciting.
All right, time to move to the top of my rundown, where MSNBC contributor Michael Eric Dyson said on News Nation with Tamron Hall that child abuse is a pathology African-American people failed to address. He went on to say that corporal punishment has been internalized from slavery practices. His comments come in the wake of the Adrian Peterson child abuse scandal. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what Dyson had to say.
Black people were beat and hit in slavery. We were reprimanded. We were whipped. We were lashed. Then some slave parents, especially women, had to beat their kids in front of the slave master to prove that they could go along with the slave master's intention to keep them from being rebellious spirits. So that's a horrible situation that African-American people were placed in. But as a result of that, we began to absorb that kind, collectively speaking, that kind of practice. And from then on, we've reproduced it. And let's be be real. One of the reasons many African-American people beat their kids is to prevent them from being beat by the master even worse. And one of the reasons we beat our kids so severely now is because we don't want the police to hurt them later because they've sassed them. They've said something that's wrong. So instead of approaching the police to make sure that they don't kill our kids, we, of course, feel that the only power we have is to make sure that our kids are behaved correctly.
CNN's Don Lemon made a similar point. And I had a very long conversation with my colleague Larry Elder about this. Larry Elder wrote a book about his relationship, his frayed relationship with his father, called Dear Father, Dear Son. And his father had a very heavy hand with Larry and his brothers. If they stepped out of line, they got whoopings to the point to where marks were left on their bodies. And he hated his father. And then had this, I think it was a 10-hour conversation with his dad, and understood where his dad was coming from. And he said one of the interesting things that happened after this book was published and people read it, he started to get emails and responses from people who read the book and internalized it, was that it wasn't a black thing. It was a Southern thing. Larry's dad grew up in the Deep South. And in the South, that's the way you discipline your children. If your kids get out of line, you know, you gave them a swat on the behind, or you hit them with a switch or whatever. And he said he was shocked at the number of letters he got from white people who grew up in the South who said, this is how our parents disciplined us.
Well, see, that's it. In part, whether it's the South or the North, corporal punishment was universal. This is something, even at schools. I remember I was in grade school and there was this big thing about, oh, it's now not okay for, you know, the principal to hit the kids here in Southern California. So this is a universal thing. The problem I have with that argument is we're certainly not going to dismiss the historical experience. But the fact is, generation after generation, Americans, whatever your complexion, we make choices, right? We're generations from that. We make choices to become better people. And you want to talk about a racist argument. And he says that why we beat our children so severely. I have a feeling that there are some African-American parents out there who do not beat their children. I have a tiny feeling that not all of them do severely beat their children. And to suggest that they all do is a problem, to suggest that this is something that, as Dyson said, a collective mindset, that they're just kind of never adjusted, never became better. And look, we do repeat what we experienced as a child. But we can all look back at all of our ancestry, and we can look at, especially if you've got poor immigrants, or if you did grow up in the South, you can move beyond that. To suggest that African Americans haven't, or won't, or don't have the capacity to, I think is, if anybody else was saying it, would be considered racist.
Now, Cruiser, your family's Polish, correct?
Polish and Irish, yes.
Okay, how long did it take before they assimilated when they came to this country? A couple generations?
Yeah, I would say by the time my dad's second generation, it's pretty well assimilated by then already.
That's pretty much the American experience. It takes a couple generations. Sure. Slavery was abolished in the 1860s. To say that blacks have not integrated into society and assimilated into society from the 1860s, from something that's been illegal. No one now who's alive was alive during slavery. And he's acting like this was yesterday, and that's why they behave this way. I don't buy it.
I will not dismiss the idea, the historical nugget in there. It sounds plausible to me, actually. The fact that now we're talking about the evolution, too, though, yes, things should have changed by now. To say that, to reference it as if it happened yesterday is not right, but I'm not dismissive of his central point. I think it sounds highly plausible, actually. But again, cultures being what they are, there are all other cultures that severely discipline their children too, and it happens, and it doesn't work. It doesn't. When you see most serial killers, most bad people in society got their butts kicked by their parents a lot. If you went back and I'm comfortable with making that blanket assertion. We can go look, and I'm pretty sure I'll be found to be true. I mean, you had Ray Lewis of all people in this topsy-turvy world was addressing this Adrian Peterson thing before Monday Night Football last week, and he was saying, well, my mama used to hit me with a switch to keep me from running with the bad kids, and it worked. And I said, no, it didn't. You killed a guy. You just happen to have enough money to pay your friends to shut up in front of the judge and to go to jail for you. It didn't work at all.
And then there's those of us who had either psychologically abusive environments, which I did, or physically abusive, and it teaches you what not to become. That it's not automatically that, oh, that was great for me, so I'm going to do it to my kids. In fact, it has the reverse effect. So I think that it dismisses the importance of the individual experience, and once again, it puts all Black Americans into one basket, that they're all condemned into this one way of being. And I think that that's the kind of mentality from the so-called elite or the media that needs to be challenged.
And anecdotally, I'll just talk about myself here. I was kind of a wild kid, bad ADHD, got in trouble at school, got in trouble at home, got in trouble. And for the more heavy-handed among my elders, that never really worked for me. My Irish grandmother, when she would just do this, when she would just give me the look of disappointment, that was it. That froze me in my tracks every time. The whole, why, you're going to get spanked, you're going to get nothing.
Remember that look, Tammy.
I'll remember.
Whenever Cruiser gets out of line, you got to give him a look.
I'll practice it.
When Grandma gave me that look, I was done.
Yeah.
All right. Now it's time to go under the radar. So we're taking a look at some stories that should have made bigger headlines, but didn't for some reason. Most notably because George Stephanopoulos was on vacation. Cruiser, you're up first.
Under the radar, Jane's Addiction frontman Perry Farrell says he understands Republicans now that he's older. Perry was interviewed by Billboard magazine ahead of the Sunset Strip Music Festival last weekend. Farrell said he understands why people get conservative. They want a safe environment for themselves and their children. He added that he understands the Republican viewpoint now. He says he's worked hard for his money and understands wanting to keep it. He believes that President Obama should be taxing the super rich instead of the millions of hardworking Americans who are struggling to get by. Go look at it. It's on Billboard Online. It's a delicious interview because he says Obama's got it completely wrong. And he said, he calls himself a fiscal Republican right now. And then the Billboard guy tries to run cover right away. He goes, but he's not done yet. That was all he could come up with. And Farrell went off on him again, and it was brilliant. And I think, Exene Cervenka from X last year came out and said she's rock and roll is libertarian. I don't know why so many of them think they're, the late 60s anti-war, it lends itself to libertarianism, and I hope more established elder statesmen come out and say
Malcolm
something.
from Malcolm in the Middle came out as a Republican this last week,
Good
too.
for him.
Well, this is why. It's in the interest of the left to have everybody not end up being entrepreneurs, not having enough money, not noticing taxes, because it keeps them out of the hot water.
All right, Tammy, what do you have for us?
All right, well, under my radar, top senators believe that they have found a way for states to tax the internet purchases you make. How? Well, by linking online sales taxes to separate legislation prohibiting internet access taxes and passing it in the post-election lame duck session of Congress. So this is what they're doing. The moratorium, by the way, there's a moratorium right now on access taxes. It runs out December 11th. That means that whatever your bill would be with your provider, you're not getting a tax on that because of the generosity of the federal government. A bill called the Marketplace and Internet Tax Fairness Act would extend the moratorium for a decade while allowing states to require online merchants to charge sales taxes, requiring them to. Now, see, this is what they're doing. Oh, look how great we are. We're going to extend the moratorium on access, and then, oh, by the way, you'll get taxed by your states on every purchases that you make. And the moratorium, of course, even the wording I like, it's as though we're doing you a favor by not taxing you again. And in this particular instance, it's also about we're losing revenue. Well, it was never yours in the first place. There should be a bill, of course, that bans a tax on internet access in general. But this is exactly the kind of backdoor kind of way of taxing you, while the news will be, oh, bipartisan support of no access tax. That's what's going to happen.
Well, usually they find a way to make it a temporary tax, which there's no such thing as a temporary tax. You know, the phone tax that you pay, that was supposed to pay for the Spanish-American War and then go away when the war was paid off. Every time you go across a bridge...
Are we still at war with Spanish? Oh. Oops.
Only over
I've got plans.
tapas,
That's
right? Every time you go over a bridge in New York, that toll was supposed to just be there until the bridge was paid off, and then it was supposed to go away. The income tax started out theoretically as a temporary tax. So all of these taxes are supposed to be there for one thing. Oh, let's put this tax on the books to pay for this one thing, and then it'll go away. BS, never happens.
Well, don't fall for
That's
it,
how they're going to do it. That's the Trojan horse.
Keyword, fairness. They put fairness in the name of the bill. Anytime that happens, start looking over your shoulder because someone's coming up with a knife.
All right, now it's time for me to go under the radar, where drama on and off the air for co-hosts of ABC's The View is making headlines. The show, now in its 8th season, is off to a fiery start thanks to two co-hosts, Nicole Wallace and Rosie O'Donnell. The two got into a very heated exchange on the air that reportedly carried off the air once the taping was finished. Producers had to call both of them in and ordered them to calm the hell down. The ladies were discussing a conservative commentator's recent remark that President Obama is a narcissist. It was Charles Krauthammer, if you're interested. That's when the drama began. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
Joe Biden has an easier time with Congress because I think Joe Biden genuinely loves people. And I think he and his wife are more comfortable.
So are you implying that Obama doesn't?
Yeah.
He doesn't love people?
I don't think so.
Oh, that's...
Wow. I mean, I think he loves you people.
No.
I do. I think he loves the three of you. You've all campaigned for him.
You were so wrong.
And I think he loves you guys.
I met him when he was a senator. He's a very personable person.
No, I didn't. And so, you know, we have to really be careful. It's what we were talking about yesterday that we didn't talk about, where people just make assumptions.
All right, I want to correct the record here. It's the 18th year of The View, not the 8th year.
Unfortunately, we've had an extra 10 years just in that minute. It's horrible.
Now, here's my prediction, and I want to see what you two think about this. The big fight that's going to happen this year, and there is going to be a knockdown, drag-out fight on the set, is not going to be between Nicole Wallace, an MSNBC Republican, and Rosie O'Donnell. It's going to be between Rosie and Whoopi. It's going to be a fight over territory, and it's going to be vicious.
They got 2 alpha she-males in, and it's not going to end. And it's gotten so bad there now that they're making me like Nicole Wallace, which is almost impossible to do. I've not had anything good to say about her for 6 years.
Well, she's already backed up a lot. I mean, the way her approach is, the nature of how she's approaching it, which tells you that Rosie doesn't want her there at all, because that's about as lame duck of a Republican you can get is in her. And if she wasn't, she wouldn't have been chosen.
And Rosie still can't stand her.
Yeah, exactly. So look, Rosie's only signed on for a year. There's an anticipation that this is not going to go well. The man that helped make it work before worked with Barbara Walters. He's also been kicked out.
Bill Getty.
And so now they've got an MSNBC producer there, of course, with a great success history there with MSNBC. It's unfortunate because as a feminist, I love, strong conversation. They said when I went in there and talked to them that they wanted to get back to the smart conversations as what it represented in the beginning. And
by the way, all that meant
it.
is they're kicking Sherry Shepherd off the show.
Yeah, I'll tell you. The world is round again.
All right, that's going to do it for today's show. Are you watching The View? We all know that Stephen Cruiser is. Or is the show run its course? What about 1 in 4 Americans wanting to say, take a hike, America, we want to be our own country? We want to know what you think, so be sure to leave your comments in the comment section below. I'm John Phillips for Stephen Cruiser and Tammy Bruce joining me here in Los Angeles. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.